Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Purpose and Valor Podcast. My name is Marcus, and this podcast is about clarity, leadership, responsibility, and learning how to move forward, especially when life feels heavy or uncertain. This podcast is for people who feel stuck, overwhelmed, or unsure about their next step, but still want to grow, lead, and live with intention. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Purpose and Valor Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about something that keeps a lot of people stuck longer than they need to be. And that's the idea that you need everything figured out before you move forward. There's this pressure put on people to have a full drawn out plan, to know exactly where they're going, how it's going to work, and what the outcome will be before they even take action. And, on the surface, that sounds responsible. That sounds like the right thing to do. It sounds like you're trying to do things the right way. But in reality, that way of thinking is what keeps people stuck. Let me dive into that a little better. There's this expectation that before you move forward, you should have clarity on everything. Where you're going, what it's going to look like, how long it's going to take. But life doesn't always work like that. And most people know that, but they still hold themselves to that standard. And that's fine. That's not a bad thing, right? And what happens is they just find themselves sitting in that space trying to figure it all out instead of actually moving forward. And the longer you stay there, the heavier it starts to feel. Because now it's not just about the decision, it's about the pressure of needing to get it right. The more you try to control every outcome, the harder it becomes to take that first step. I want you to think about a time where you were trying to figure everything out before making a move, where you were thinking through every single little angle, every possible outcome, trying to make sure you didn't make the wrong decision. And because of that, you stayed in the same place longer than you needed to. Even when I was trying to, create Purpose and Valor and come up with the vision and the long-term goal, I knew what I wanted for Purpose and Valor. And, I kind of got stuck in that position myself where what do I need to do right now? What gets this moving forward? And, I took that step back to take a step forward, if you will, and was able to take action right away, and that was deciding to go back to school. And as I was in school, being able to come up with the next step, creating a website, starting the sauna sessions, starting the podcast, and building that momentum, and looking back when I was in that stuck phase of like, okay, I got everything figured out. I got the vision. I know where this is. I know where I want this to go. I know, generating clients and I knew everything that needed to take place. I just didn't have that first step written down or that first step planned. And once I did get that first step going, that's where that momentum started generating. That's where progress started to happen. And I didn't need it all figured out right then and there. I just needed to make that first step and, having that vision and everything, that's great, but a vision is just a vision if you don't take the first step. A big reason people get stuck in this is because they're trying to avoid failure. And I've been there plenty of times. You're trying to avoid making the wrong move. You're trying to avoid wasting time. But the reality is, standing still costs more time than moving forward imperfectly. You don't learn by just thinking, you learn by doing. And when you're not moving, you're not learning anything new. You're just repeating the same thoughts over and over again, and that's where frustration builds. What actually moves you forward isn't having everything figured out. It's just having that one clear next step. Something simple, something actionable, something you can do right now. And that next step doesn't have to solve everything. It just has to move you forward just enough to build momentum. When you take one step, you get in new information. You see things a little differently. You adjust accordingly. And then you take another step. And then another step. And then before you know it, you've got so much momentum that's built up, your vision is becoming reality. So, I talk a lot about clarity and needing clarity. Well, here you don't need perfect clarity to move forward. You just need enough clarity to take that first step. That's it. And the more you move, the clearer things become, right? Not before, during. Okay, let that sink in a little bit. Clarity isn't something you wait for, it's something you build. If you've been feeling stuck because you don't have everything figured out, don't worry. You're not alone. I've been there many times, and I'm sure there are hundreds, probably thousands of people that are in the same position. But just remember, you don't need the full plan. You just need the next step. Take that, and the rest will start to unfold. Thank you, everybody, for tuning into another episode of the Purpose and Valor Podcast. Always remember, stay focused, stay strong, and keep moving forward.